Hey everyone, welcome to PunkCast. My name is William Maxwell. I'm a student of Web3 and the owner of Punk 9527. CryptoPunks are 10,000 uniquely generated characters stored permanently on the Ethereum blockchain. No punk is the same. This is a show dedicated to celebrating the punks behind the punk. My hope for this podcast is that we capture the essence of the punk culture, elevate the brand and the individual behind the punk. One last thing. Projects discussed on the show is not financial advice. Crypto and NFTs are a volatile and risky asset class. Please always do your own research. Other than that, let's go. Hi everyone, welcome back to another episode of PunkCast. Today we've got another punk special. He's a super clean punk, 2289, with two addies, front beard, and classic grey forward cap. He's a family man, tech tinkerer, design thinker, and one of the rare few punk claimers left in the space. Please welcome TJ to the show. TJ, how are you?
Hey, Max. Doing well. Thanks for having me. I'm looking forward to it.
Nice. Mate, I've been trying to track down all the claimers in the space and randomly came across yours the other day. So yeah, definitely excited to unpack your claiming story.
Yeah, definitely.
Maybe you can kick us off with, I guess, your handle, TJ/GuyWalkin. Like, are they your real names? And I guess, how did you come up with those handles?
Well, obviously TJ is just, something I've always gone by, in real life. It's funny you asked that. Like, Guy Walkin is something that stuck from, I think I was first introduced to the internet in 1995, 96. And back then it was full of animated GIFs. And there was one animated GIF that I right-clicked and saved as back then. But it was a little guy walking. It was so smooth. Someone spent a lot of time making this little tiny 30 by 30 pixel animated GIF that stood out to me from the sea of, mid 90s internet. And so from that point, I just used it as a moniker, Guy Walkin. It was my Guy Walkin. And so, obviously when you get into ENS and, I just said, all right, well, GuyWalkin.eth. I just got to keep with it.
Nice story. Are you familiar with DK's work? He's got this collection called Let's Walk.
I am familiar with that. And actually, I think it was my first Let's Walk. I think it was early 2021. It was like one of the earlier NFTs I bought because I was drawn to the animation and the cleanness of the animation. And, I think I was one of his first series. I got, what was his name? He was a little gray hoodie guy. I can't think of what he called him. But yeah, it was his first series. And then I watched him blow up from that. And it was the only one I ever bought. But I've always been interested in his, one of ones and just like the GM he just did the other day. And, he's just a really talented animator for sure.
Yeah, he's super talented. Yeah, I think that's the first thing that came to my mind when you spoke about Guy Walkin and describing the moniker. I think the Let's Walk sort of series sort of popped up. So,
well, that and Invisible Friends, all those like Let's Walk is very similar to that little gift that I downloaded back in 96. And so, yeah, I actually got into Invisible Friends for a little while and yeah, DK and yeah.
So you're the walking guy. Great.
Yeah, that's right.
So TJ, why don't you give the audience a bit of an introduction to yourself and your background and everything sort of pre-crypto and NFTs, just for a bit of color.
Yeah, sure. Like I said, the internet, 95, 96, I think, I was fascinated with it and just, I can remember my roommate bringing home a computer and we were just absorbed by it. I mean, hours and hours. Back then you could, skip a meal surfing the web and not even realize hours went by, and I know that still happens some today, but not to me.
Where did you grow up? Just out of curiosity. So where?
I've been Florida, United States, my whole life, pretty much. So, Gulf Coast, growing up near the water. So it's always been fun. But yeah, just the internet, back then. And, I just knew it was just this new digital world already starting back then and really wanted to take part in it. I late 90s went to a school for audio and video production and The internet was still just kind of taking off, but, really wanted to switch and get into digital media and really changed gears at that point, late 90s. And, got my first real kind of web job back in 99. And I was making banner ads, marketing banner ads, hundreds and hundreds of banner ads, and that slowly expanded into, building out websites and, taking it a little bit further into, integrations. And so, last 20, 25 years, I've been working in the Web2 space. I've managed websites, I've managed development teams, and have really been able to build some pretty cool stuff over those years.
Nice. So when you say Web 2, like, would you sort of see yourself more as front end, or you sort of see yourself full stack, sort of dev type work, engineering type work? Like, how would you sort of describe that?
Yeah, and early 2000s, I would say I was front end, and then slowly transitioned into management of teams and owning the teams, and a lot of it, I can go back and look just the usability and having a UX person, or having front end and also having back end, but having that full stack team and working primarily with the business, a product owner, as a digital product owner, and managing backlogs, the ceremonies of agile. And so yeah.
Don't take offense to this, but I think you just seeing you in real life visually, you've got like Mark Cuban vibes to you. So did you did you ever work on Real Player or anything like that?
No,
He was
but
working on a streaming program back then, right?
I do remember Real Player, and actually all of those old streaming and MP3s. A funny story going back to just MP3s. I can remember it might have been 1997. I used to love downloading cartoon sound effects and different sound effects through these message boards. Like people, and I still have probably like
I remember those
3.5-inch floppy drives of sound effects, and I can remember in these message boards, people couldn't figure out how to play these sound effects. And, then people would say, oh, that's because it's a wave file encoded as MP3. And so I'm sitting here watching these people, argue about the naming conventions of a wave file encoded as MP3. And they're like, why don't you just call it an MP3? And then, so, I know I've got some wave files encoded with MP3, and, but, I know Mark Cuban was all part of just taking advantage of that technology, and, Real Player and all that, a lot of the streaming stuff. I remember in late 99, even encoding videos for the company I was working for that was the size of a postage stamp, and I was fascinated with putting video on the internet, and just knew that someday the bandwidth would catch up to a point where you could actually have good quality video. And, obviously for, I don't know how many years now we've been there. We've definitely been there.
Jeez. Yes, you're super OG in some respects. Then I mean, the those early internet days were super crazy, and you got to participate in
Yeah.
a lot of that,
Yeah.
right? So, what kind of products did you end up building, delivering back then?
Yeah. So, for the first big chunk of my career, 16 years, starting in 99, I worked for a large computer software hardware distributor. So, any manufacturer you can think of, Apple, HP, IBM, Logitech, all these big brands would go through this distributor. And so, that was a lot of the advertising I was doing. And then I got to build a lot of their websites for a B2B function, and integrate a lot of data into that. And after that, I realized this B2B space, I was kind of sheltered from, what was really going on in the internet. And so I got a chance to move to one of the largest restaurant chains in the US. I didn't catch where you were actually.
I'm based in Hong Kong, but grew up in Australia. But
Hong Kong. Okay, gotcha. Yeah, one of the largest restaurant chains, and I really got to experience that hyper focused user experience, pixel perfect, A/B testing, and got to integrate, online ordering, got to integrate reservation systems. And so I think those kind of things, just, data driven type websites was really a big part of where I was going.
Oh, cool. And so, like, did you get, personally investing in the dot-com boom back then as well?
No, I watched it. I knew it was frothy too. Like it was a lot of, I guess I'm more reserved, just like today. Like I see a lot of the hype, and it was hype. And I was pretty sheltered in that B2B company. And they were very conservative in their risk, so I didn't have to worry too much back then.
And so talk to me a little bit about your journey into crypto and NFTs. Like, when did you first discover it, and what was your entry point?
Yeah, and being in the web, I whether it was tech blogs or RSS feeds, I'm still a slave to my RSS reader. I that is how I consume my media, just because it's still easily digestible for me. But I just followed so much tech and trying to find just new ways of using tech. And I can remember being, gosh, it had to have been early in the Bitcoin days. I'd heard about it and I went to explore how to buy it and I could not figure it out. Like I just couldn't figure out how to buy it. I was like, well, how do you even buy this? And so, I gave up. I don't remember, life got in the way or whatever. And I just gave up, and that had to have been, early in the days. And I think finally 2015, I was able to kind of get some Bitcoin and said, all right, I figured it out. I needed an exchange. I needed all that. And, just kind of held on to it. And, I was fascinated with it. So I continued to just follow it. And that's kind of when Ethereum started in 2017, started bubbling up in my news feeds and just everything. And I wanted to explore this a little bit more, and really, you know, obviously Ethereum had a different business case than Bitcoin did with the smart contracts. And so I wanted to explore that and see how it was being used, and sold a little bit of my Bitcoin back then to buy some Ethereum, and just held a couple of Ethereum. And that's kind of was my first introduction to crypto.
Nice. Do you remember what your first NFT was?
Yep, I do. Obviously, CryptoPunk. that was my very first NFT.
That was the first NFT.
Yeah, that was my first one.
So, just reading up on your previous records here, I think you've just got a note in saying that there were the 1,000 paintings was your introduction to collecting art. Could you explain what that was?
Yeah. So so again, back into this tech side of things, and actually, you I know your audience can't see it, but that number right there, 941,
Yeah.
that painting right there. What's interesting about that one was, this guy, this was maybe it was 2006, 2008, something like this. He released his website where he had 1,000 paintings, and those 1,000, and they're handmade. And the price of those paintings, he was exploring kind of supply and demand. And the price of those paintings was equal to the number minus 1,000. Right. So if your number was 950, the painting would be $50. If you wanted number one, that costed $999. But then he also integrated a discount model into it, where every 100 paintings that were sold, the first 100 paintings had a 90% discount. So that number one painting really didn't cost as much. It was 90% off. And then the second 100 was 80% off, third 100 was 70, until it basically went away. And the site's gone. I was trying to do research, like the guy's kind of disappeared. He was just kind of like this, theoretical biologist that was exploring supply and demand. And But the interesting thing that he did on that was he algorithmically put a number on the back of it that acted as your password to the website so that you can buy and sell this painting. So there was a secondary market, and so there was actually people selling these things on secondary. Obviously I got one high enough up to where it didn't cost that much.
Yeah. That's super fast. When was this?
This had to have been like probably 2006, maybe.
Wow, that's super early.
It was 2006, 2007, somewhere around there. And he was in Switzerland, and so he had these paintings sold all over the world, and he was shipping them. I still got the box that he shipped that in. And it was just this aspect of kind of like the painting plus the mathematics plus the algorithm that he included to go in and then listed as a secondary sale. It almost reminded me of punks in this weird kind of way where it's its own little marketplace.
Totally. Just for the listeners as well, I think the painting is literally would you say it's a 30 by 30 canvas with, some text on it, painting of a number. So I think in TJ's case, it's got 941 on a white square canvas. So that's super interesting, TJ. It's almost like NFT-like in terms of the mechanics of how he was thinking about it back then, right? Something that we would do now.
Yeah, and I'd be fascinated to know his thoughts on, blockchain, because this was 2006, 2007, and he's creating a hash on the back of it so that you can get in and access it, and it reminds you a lot of blockchain.
And so what was the redemption process like? So if you bought the digital piece off the primary, then you can trade it on secondary. Could you figure out which ones were already redeemed for the physical, or do you remember what that mechanism was like?
Yeah, I that's a good question. I don't it's that goes pretty far back. I
That's okay.
know that
Never mind.
I don't know if it was through email back then, like if we had like an email exchange with the artist, but I do remember there was a list of the paintings when they were available and not available, similar to like how Punks did theirs with the big image in the middle of the page. He had a big list of the numbers that said available, already claimed, listed on secondary. And so there must have been, back then it probably was a web form, or, it wasn't super dynamic.
Sounds like the Google Sheets at Bitcoin ordinals were taking were taking place.
Oh yeah. Yeah, the Google Sheets, there's too many Google Sheets going around sometimes.
So TJ, are you into art like before sort of NFTs? Like it sounded like you were collecting back in 2006, right?
No, not at all. It's the technology of it, right? And to kind of transition into the punk story, and claiming punks, that was really what drew me to it, was the technology. Like I was exploring Bitcoin, I was exploring Ethereum, and now there's this way to kind of claim like what's the usability of it. And that's something I've always been kind of drawn towards is the usability of digital properties. Like how easy is it, back to some of my career of reserving a table at a restaurant. How can you get that into its simplest form, to where you don't have to overburden someone, while they're on their mobile device, and so that's always been my draw, is just this simplification of technology, even to the point of, how can my mom come over to my house and use my home stereo system in the most easy way without her throwing up her hands and say, how do I turn your TV on? But just a simplification of technology. So I've never really been into art at all. Like other than visiting a museum, I grew up, I can remember my very first field trip in elementary school was to an art museum. Fascinating, great art museum here on Florida Gulf Coast called Ringling Museum. Has some amazing art. That it's an amazing museum. It really is. But I grew up there. It's like I was able to go there on a regular basis, and just the awe and the size of art, I think, always put it outside of my realm, just because it was so big in that instance.
Yeah, totally. Same. Just going back a little bit too. How did you actually discover CryptoPunk? Like, what led you into the project? Do you remember?
Well, I don't know if it was one of their tweets, because I know that I was a user of Larva Labs' Androidify app, right? And that was around that same time, I think, 2008, 2009. Maybe it's 2010. I can't remember the actual year of the Androidify app.
What is that? Can you explain what that is?
Androidify, so Larva Labs put out an app where you could download this app and you can customize a little Android figure, the Android phone guy. You can make them short, tall, wide, thin. You could change out their hair color. You could put 3D glasses on them, which obviously predates punks, but you could change their outfits, their shoes, and I love this thing. I had so much fun playing with that little app. And so I remember it was Larva Labs that did that. I don't know if I followed them on Twitter at that point, because I'm not huge into Twitter. I post things I find interesting. I don't engage very often, but it was just one of those things that it had to have been just through some of my tech channels. And I can remember, generally when I'd find stuff, my friends would always ask, where do you find this stuff? And I'm like, honestly, I don't know. I think it just finds me, and I just think this stuff, like, I'm just always finding little interesting tidbits and sharing them with friends and family. And, they're just always curious about what I'm into. I think it must have been a tweet, because it was only 2 days later that I claimed my punks. So I was very early in the punk claiming process.
And I've just got your very first punk up now that you claimed. It was 1111, which looks like it's now owned by Von Mises. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. He has taken that punk and it is his brand now. It's nice to see him. So I wave to him every time.
So talk to us about the claiming process. Like, how were you assessing which ones to claim, like, at that time?
Well, you just said it, the number 1111. Like, getting back to the art versus the math, right? And I was presented with that block of 10,000 punks, and my mind said, how am I going to even pick one of these things? Let me go check the numbers. And I think I even started lower than 1,000. I was going into, like, any number that matched 11, 22, and all, and I was like, okay, let me try 222. I had no education about the developer punks, the dev punks back then. I didn't know that they reserved 1,000 of them. I don't know when that actually was communicated. Like, even during those first 2 days, that second day when I was trying to claim, I just said, okay, let me hit 1111. Finally, one hit, right? Like, I was like, oh, there's one that's available. Let me claim this. And then I realized, I don't even remember, but I remember the usability of it, and, not having ETH in the right wallet. On their website, they had the entire process, how to claim, so.
TJ, would you mind just describing, I guess, I mean, your claiming process? Because I know most of the claimers that I've had on have had a different sort of journey, from Tony Herrera, who took a lot of time to process, to Hemba, who was running multiple transactions
Oh yeah.
at the time as well. So, like, what was your sort of process? Were you structured about thinking about this? Like, how are you thinking about all of this at the time?
Yeah. I knew I wanted some, right? I wanted to experience, and I only claimed three. I wasn't like a Hemba who, figured out how to run this script and said, I want them all. Right. I was like, I just want to experience this. I want to grab a few of these, I want to know what the process is, and that was my thought process behind that, is understanding the experience. And that's what I did back then. And there wasn't a lot of logic behind choosing other than the numbers. Like I think the three that I claimed, 1111 it's easy. It's like you go find a number, it's available. And then I think my second one was like, okay, well, what about 1234? Is 1234 available? Nope, 1234 wasn't available. So what did I do? I'm looking at this giant thing, and the next one I claimed was 1232 because 1233 wasn't available. All right, there's 1232. It worked. And that one actually turned out to be a single trait pigtails, which, has some good qualities to it. Not many pigtails in circulation. And then the other one I tried for, I did try the 2222, 3333, 444, and got all the way up to 9999 and realized that, none of those numbers were available. And that's when I said, well, what's the highest available right now? And that's when I claimed 9997. I was like, okay, 9997 is available. I'm grabbing it. And then, I'll call it a day. And 9997 to me was when you were claiming, I knew nothing of traits, knew nothing about rarity. It was just going through and saying, hey, I'm just grabbing a few of these. And, the ones I got were the ones I got. Knew nothing about them, didn't have any, educated, knowledge of just who they were or what they were. And, so 9997, that's, I know one of your questions, later on is, what is one of your, what if it's one of your, biggest losses? But, for the listeners, like 9997 is a zombie punk. So,
boom, zombie punk.
Yeah, but I was a claimer of a zombie punk. So,
it's funny. I've just noticed the attributes. It's also a 2 attribute front beard and a gray forward cap, which is what you've got as a human version of your zombie punk.
That's right. Yeah. So back in, what was it, September, October 2020? So this is the story of how I got 2289, my current punk, with the gray hat and the beard. And I can remember having this zombie, wallet story aside, it was September 2020 when I finally was able to recover my punks. So I don't, that we can get into that in a second. But the story of my current punk is that I was looking at these things and I realized that the zombies had some similar traits as these other ones. And I was like, you know what, man, I need to get what I was in my mind calling the warm body. Right. So I started looking for, you could do searches on traits, and I found a punk that was up for sale that had the traits I wanted that matched my zombie. So I went down this, and it was listed for 5 ETH. And back then the floor was 3. And my 2289 is not a, it's not a high level punk. It's a low level punk. It's not, mid tier even. It's just, bottom. And so I bought this punk for 5 ETH because back then, if you made a bid on certain punks, you were kind of showing your hand, and people could try to come in, take it. And I was nervous that someone would grab this punk while it was listed if I put in like a 3.5 ETH bid or something. Right. I was so nervous. And so I bought it for 5 ETH, and Discord went nuts. They couldn't believe a floor punk went for 5 ETH.
So 5 ETH at the time was here $1,800.
Yeah,
on the 15th of September 2020.
Yeah. Yeah. And so I bought that, and then, I had to hop in Discord and tell why I bought it. And so what I did with those two punks is I went into Photoshop and I created a half warm body, half zombie punk that, I called the transition. It was two punks that, and then he actually, even Larva Labs, they actually retweeted it saying that here's a novel idea, find your, matching punk, and so it was fun. It was definitely fun.
No, it's nice. And just you with your current punk as well, I just noticed it's actually a Hember claim punk as well. So
Yeah, that's right.
Hember must be everywhere, this guy.
Yeah.
And then I just looking at the timestamps here. So basically you bought that on the 20th September 2020. And then 9 days later you sell the zombie.
Yeah. Yeah, I tried, and back then too, the big thing was wrapping punks. You could wrap punks. And what OpenSea was just getting into as well was bundles, right? And so I said, this is a great opportunity to try and bundle two punks together, one zombie, one warm body. And I wasn't really, everyone said, don't sell it, don't sell it, don't sell it. And if you go back to September 1st, when I first recovered my punks and going into Discord, I was so happy to recover my punks. And as soon as I went into Discord, everyone was like, what are you going to do with them? And I'm like, well, I'm here to sell them. I want to sell them all, and so I even said, I think I'm here to sell, not collect. And in a span of 30 days, I sold them all, but I was there to collect. I was there to take part in this, NFT space, this Web3 space, to experience it from a bigger, view.
That's kind of crazy. So you claimed in 2017, 3 years on. So maybe you could talk us through a bit of the time stamping here as well, because I think you said that you lost your keys and then you sort of found it. But I want to get to understanding what made you want to sell eventually at that point in time.
Yeah. Okay. So I claimed, and the funny thing is, shortly after claim, so if on Larva Labs website, they list the wallet that you can use to claim, which was Mist, MIST. And, I downloaded that. I was also getting ready to move. I was selling my home. I kind of had claimed these punks. And within probably a month, 2 months, I packed this computer away. I packed my workstation away. This was my video editing workstation that I claimed these on. And I packed it away. And I kind of forgot about I knew the computer was there, but I kind of said, I just hadn't fired it up. I moved into my new house. I hadn't fired it up. And I don't know, maybe a few years later, I was at work and I don't know how I even got it, but I got a Twitter notification of someone selling a zombie punk. And I looked at it and I looked at my work colleagues and I was like, I have one of these. And they're like, no way. I'm like, yeah, I have. And I think it sold for, I don't know, 15,000 US dollars, And I'm like, no, I have one. And so I went home, I fired up this computer, and the Mist wallet, I couldn't get in. And so then I went back and, I've been a longtime password manager, user of a password manager, and I looked at my password, for my Mist wallet, and it wasn't working. I'm like, what? I'm really good with passwords. Why isn't this working? I was so frustrated. People at work were just really hounding on me, saying I'm the Bitcoin pizza guy. I lost all these dollars.
Satoshi.
Yeah, like I am the poster child for what not to do, right? Like I have access to all these, this value, but I can't get to it because my password's not working. And so I knew my password was right. I just knew it. I'm like, this is maddening to me, and my whole family, they're feeling my stress. My wife, everyone is just like, oh no, what if we can't get these? And so I was running, I think it's called like Hashcat or something. It's some like wallet key password logger something. I was running a password logger against my wallet for days and days trying to access this thing. I was researching. I was like just really investing a lot of time trying to recover this wallet. And it finally led to some Google conversation about the Mist wallet. And someone had downgraded their Mist wallet from beta to alpha. And so I was like, oh, well, that's interesting. And I looked and I was on a beta version of the software. And I went and looked through all my downloads and I found the actual original version that I downloaded, the alpha version. So I uninstalled, reinstalled the alpha version, used my password, and it unlocked. And I was just so joyous. I was just like, yeah.
I can
It
imagine.
was just amazing to be able to access these punks, especially after starting to investigate them a little bit and see that there was actually a market. I didn't know a market, you look and you can hear punks talking about, just some of the bear during, 2018. And I didn't even know there was a market built up around these until that day I was at work, and that I realized there was value to them.
That's crazy. So like, mate, so when you claimed, you basically claimed and just left it there. You didn't do anything
That's
with it.
right.
You were just
Yeah,
tinkering.
that's right.
So you didn't use it as an avatar on Twitter. You weren't active on Twitter. Basically, for 3 years dormant. Then you had to look at a notification that said Zombie Punk is sold for 15,000. That's what triggered you to start searching
Yeah,
around.
that's right.
So what how were you feeling at that point in time? Were you like excited, elated, euphoric that, you're sitting on a bit of a treasure chest?
Yeah, and that's why I came in to sell them, right? I was like, you know what? There's not often that someone wants to hand you a big, $20,000 US dollar bill, right? And say, here you go, for something that you did 3 years ago, but what I ended up doing was just buying more punks. And, one of the lessons obviously I always learned is I should have just put everything into punks and just kept going punks, but I did diversify and I wanted to experience other platforms and other NFTs and I wanted to understand the usability of those as well.
Yeah, of course. No, I think hindsight's always your best friend, right? But I probably would have done the same thing as well. But so when you went to sell though, were you starting to engage back into the Discord and on Twitter with other punks at the time? Like, what was that sort of vibe like?
Yeah, and that was super welcoming. I always, that there wasn't a lot of people like in real life I could share my joy with in terms of accessing a wallet that has punks. And so that day or that next day, whatever it was within 24 hours, I went into the punk Discord. New to Discord, hadn't actually used Discord. I just knew there was a Discord link on the Punk's website. And I was like, all right, I'm going in here. I want to talk to these people. I want to, have these punks for 3 years and finally got access to them. And, and that's where everyone was like, I had a lot of people reach out to me at that time, say, hey, do you want to sell them? Like, especially the zombie, people wanted that zombie. They wanted it. And, like they're sending me direct messages and, I got to know them. And I can just remember coming into Discord and, Chuli, who I don't know if you've had Chuli on your website, but she to me was kind of this queen of the PFP that as soon as you come into Discord, she's like, hey, change your profile picture and stop having the Discord default, And so I'm like, all right, let's see, how do I do that? And back then I was thinking that Discord connected to your NFTs, but no, you had to go into Photoshop and you know. create a little image. So
Yeah. Big fan of Julie. She definitely wears the punk sort of ethos with her everywhere she goes, for sure. Do you remember any other names back then that were floating around in the Discord back then that you were engaging with? Like,
oh yeah, like Snowfro was always back then. Me and him had a race to sell our zombie punk. You know, like he had one that I can't remember what it was. It had, I think it was a zombie with a headband or something, and and so I always considered that the healthy zombie, and mine looked like, and I called him the ice cream eater. He just, that beard, that beard gets a lot of slack, like it's not one of the most desirable traits, So I always called him ice cream eater.
Yeah. It's oh man, the Discord sounded so much fun then, right? It just felt like everybody was just vibing on traits, and it was innocent. It was a bit more pure than probably what it is today, right? So
yeah, for sure. And that was the fun part, talking about traits. I really did. And I've always, my collecting, as I started getting into punks, after the sell of my first three, was, going after two traits. It wasn't popular because they're not rare, right? But I thought they were clean. I thought the cleanness of those traits just, resonated with me.
yeah. Well, I'm having a look at your other punk that you've got as well. So you've got Punk 1115, who's two Addy, wild white hair and hot lipstick. I'm a huge fan of the wild white. Like, why did you want to add her into your collection too?
The wild white. I mean, it's such a cool trait. Like, I just love that, color combination, and just it really pops. It's just a clean punk, and it was one that I wanted to keep. Yeah. Some of my other ones, like they just, there was a point where I had a wild hair guy with a mole, right? It was like he was like the cleanest mole guy you could get.
Mate, that's a super crazy and fascinating story. I love listening to these stories. Everyone's got such a just an innocent way of approaching, getting into NFT space and through punks in this sort of way, which is, I mean, you can't sort of fake this sort of provenance, right? So, which is a beautiful thing. And I'm just looking at your Twitter thread as well, and it's the one about, I think you call it the bookend. Do you want to talk to us a little bit about that? I'm just curious as to, for me, when you sort of mentioned bookend, it felt like you were closing a chapter that you're not collecting any more NFTs. Like this was it for you, right? So the Tiffany's sort of NFT came through.
It's changed. It's definitely changed, right? Like, so a lot of my NFT collecting was focused on kind of the physical items. I wanted to see, and kind of what I'm doing now is just exploring that. What can NFTs be used more? It's technology, right? Like, where can they be used in other aspects of a business, or tying physical items, whether it's like StockX or something, where they're, issuing NFTs based off of a physical collectible, or actually receiving a physical piece. And so, that's kind of what I was after. I was looking, like, some of the art blocks that I've collected come with a physical piece, or even just some of the mundane, like I can't think of the name right now, but just these little figurines that have NFC chips in them. Like, I was fascinated with how they were tying these things to the blockchain. And so when Tiffany, the tweet you're referencing is the one about the Tiffany pendant, right? And so I look at 2017, I claim these punks, and all the way up to the point of Tiffany partnering, right, and creating a physical item that ties back to that punk. Just, to me, was this pinnacle of like a physical collection, right? It's like this is too cool. Like, I mean, I'm like, when I went and picked it up, actually, I just went and picked it up a couple weeks ago. I think the tweet you're actually referencing was actually when I purchased the NFT from Tiffany's, which was really my most expensive purchase to date. But I just went and picked it up a couple weeks ago, and I'm just telling my wife, I'm like, we're sitting here and at Tiffany's for just the smallest investment that I've ever made, in anything. And here I am just claiming this physical item. It just feels like this chapter of punks to me is a good chapter for me, right? It says I went from claiming to sitting in a Tiffany's, picking up this wild white haired with diamonds all through her hair, right? Just it's a beautiful piece. Like when you see it physically, it's just like, wow, it's just an amazing uh piece of jewelry.
They're super cool. What was the experience like? Did you pick it up in Miami, or where did you pick that up?
Tampa. I picked it up in Tampa, and they were super friendly. They didn't know anything about it. They were trying to find me in the system, and so whatever they did, that they did it really good to where they were on kind of a need to know basis, like the actual store. I didn't want to have it shipped to my house because I feel that the logistics between my house and the facility is a little shadier than Tiffany's in their store. So nothing against UPS or FedEx. They deliver millions of packages, but that one's important to me. So I went, picked it up. It was great. Sat and talked with them, and they wanted to learn all about just NFTs, and that gets into where I'm passionate about is just simplifying things and talking to people about what it really is. And we're still early. We got a long way to go before the masses are onboarded to this type of technology. So
I hope so as well. The reason why I asked you about your experience there, because I went with King Katega, or the punk animator, to pick up his here in Hong Kong. And I think we were expecting, champagne and it's a bit of a celebration to go and pick it up, but we didn't get any of that. And I think his was the only one that's been picked up out of Hong Kong. And I think the only other reference point was our other friend, Art, who's based in Singapore now, went to pick his up in Singapore. He got the red carpet treatment, right? So they popped champagne bottles open for him, and I think he was having a really good time, but not so much here.
I mean, they did bring us back to a private room. We had a beautiful couch, and asked us if we wanted coffee or champagne, and they were willing. We had some coffee. We sat with them, and it was cool sitting in that little room and hanging out and talking with them, and yeah. So I wouldn't say red carpet, but it was still exciting.
No, but I mean, to your point, I mean, this is I guess it is a nice sort of way to close off a part of punk history, right? I mean, you couldn't get more symbolic than Tiffany's stamping their approval on something like this, right? Which is kind of exciting.
Yeah, I was just going to add, about just the changes now. I'm looking at kind of since that Tiffany and like to today, right? Like the dynamics, the hype, obviously the bear market. There's just a open claims. There's just a weird like I don't I follow it, but I'm not trying to chase it. All right, I'm not trying to chase everything that's going on right now.
Gotcha. And mate, like right now, if money wasn't an issue, what CryptoPunk would you be picking out?
I would always love to have my zombie back, but my biggest miss was not holding that. And I watched that zombie travel to Christie's Hong Kong and sell for $4.3 million.
Oh wow! Do you know who owns it now?
It was Mars Punks. Mars Punks. And I've seen some, fake Twitter people pop up with that zombie, and I, question them on it. They're like, hey, where'd you get that punk? It's like that punk looks familiar. It was all a learning experience, right? Like, I mean, I don't regret any of that. It was all I love my punks now. They're just part of me now. That's just gonna stay with me. And when I did claim that Tiffany's piece, it's an heirloom piece. It's something that's going to be passed to my daughter with 1115, which coincidentally is my kid's birthday, which I didn't
Oh,
choose it
wow.
that way. I did not choose that
Wow.
punk based off that number. It was only later that I realized it was.
All in the numbers there, TJ. Mate, you shouldn't beat yourself up too hard. I had Stray Bits on at one stage, and he claimed 7 of the 9 alien punks.
Oh yeah. Yep.
So,
I looked that day I was claiming. I was looking for an ape. I was looking for an alien. I was looking for anything that was different at one point, and I just couldn't find them. I remember tweeting to Larva Labs too, saying, I spent all day looking for an ape. I can't see him in here.
yeah. But, yeah, I guess we just gotta be grateful for everything, right? Just being able to participate even this early on. I think it's,
Oh, yeah. I'm still having fun. I'm still having fun.
mate, and if you were to look across, I guess, the punk community in general, would you have a favorite punk personality that comes to mind?
I do like the history, like you mentioned, Stray Bits. I love that story. I remember hearing that story when I first came back into Discord. And then just like the builders that have really kind of come out of it. Whether it was like Justin or Eric with art blocks and raindrops and just these marketplaces, like they're going after it, and it's cool to watch. Because I remember art blocks, because I had just come into Discord at that point, and I remember testing art blocks on Rinkeby, and minting, Chromie Squiggle on Rinkeby just to test the process. And I was, saying, hey, this is interesting, but, maybe add a little bit of detail on the website or something, and testing that before launch. So it's kind of cool seeing all that grow out of all that and that bulk culture.
Yeah. No, they're super cool punks in our community. Justin Trimble and Snowfro definitely leading the way for us. Actually, just another side question too. Do you actually have the V1 zombie?
I do. I do. And so, what's interesting about that is I'd mentioned leaving 1115 and the Tiffany pendant to my daughter. I have twins, so they both have the same birthday.
Ah, cute.
Me and my wife were talking about, like, well, what do I leave my son? Well, we leave him 2289 with the V1 zombie so that he has both versions of it, the warm body and the zombie version.
That's cool.
So that puts it on a kind of even playing field, maybe.
What does your wife make of all of this, TJ?
She thinks it's crazy, but
What does she think?
I tell her every single time, like, I'm like, hey, I got an offer on this punk. I'm thinking of selling it, and this was, in the early days. And she's like, well, yeah, if you want to. She's just, in tune with, whenever I tell her what's going on. And, I try to keep her plugged in with, different changes. And, she knows all the physical items that get shipped to my house, whether it's a currency from Damien Hirst or something, I'm like, what are we going to do? NFT or physical? What do we do? So she's all in tune with it. I like to, talk through her with it. And she just thinks it's pretty wild that people are, willing to pay for this stuff.
That's good that she sounds super supportive, which is something that you need. I think
Yeah.
my fiance just rolls her eyes every single time I talk about NFTs now. So and mate, if you had to describe punk culture in a few words, how would you describe that?
I would say the early portion, which I would look at, kind of getting in 2021, that, they're explorers, they're just builders, they're doers, they're just getting out there, I think in most cases pushing the industry. And I think I look back and think there's a point people get into it for the money. There's a point that people get into it for the tech, and I think the thing that will have the longest legs is the tech, right? Where that tech goes, and let the money follow it, and I think, when you start getting into flipping and all that, I think I realized I'm a collector. I'm not a flipper. I collect. I got a whole shelf of geeky stuff behind me that, is collecting. It doesn't matter at this point. The tech's gonna continue, and punks will be what punks will be. That's what everyone's kind of gone through. Like, punks are punks. I remember hearing that for years. Just punks are punks, they don't need utility. They don't need, all this, continued value being thrown back at it to demonstrate that they already are valuable. Like punks are valuable just in their own right.
Well said. Punks are punks.
Yeah.
And what's your view and position on V1 punks in general?
They're part of the story. I mean, they're part of the history. I am in an interesting spot where I didn't even know that there was a airdrop of a different punk, right? And probably until 2021. I didn't know there was a marketplace bug. There's nothing wrong with the tokens. It's all about the marketplace, right? It was all about the ability to buy and sell the tokens. So to me, the tokens are the tokens. They're V1 is part of the story. They were the ones that I claimed. I went and claimed these punks, and later I learned that they're still in my wallet in addition to some different punks. I didn't know that, until I started exploring. I agree they're part of the story. I do not think they're a derivative. I think they're the actual project that was launched by Larva Labs. And, my view on software, and it's derivative. I mean, you're going to find bugs in software, and there's always going to be a progression of that software. I've been in web development for long enough to know that, not everything's perfect when you launch it, right? But once I learned about the V1 punks and, mentioning that zombie and having the V1 version of the zombie, it kind of gives me a little bit of, like, okay, that's pretty cool that I still have the warm body version of the official CryptoPunks, but I kind of got this dead zombie version still that's kind of resurrecting from the dead, this V1 version. Just kind of plays back into that story of a warm body and a zombie kind of coming together.
Yeah, it's kind of cool. Super
Yeah.
cool. No, V1s definitely have a place in punk history. And how do you feel about, I guess, the Yuga acquisition?
Doesn't bug me. I mean, it's interesting to me from a business perspective and following how to build a business within a full Web3 business. And I'm happy that they just let them be, right? Like they're not, and they may be doing something. I know there was some talk about something a few months ago, but it is what it is. They're still there. I mean, I've not bought into the Yuga system. I've not really ventured into that area. So, I mean, I'm okay with it. I get the aspect that Larva Labs, they're developers, right? They were pushing technology. They were trying to explore technology, and to me, community management and trying to engage with your community is a harder thing to do. Like even myself, I'm not someone that generally just makes an effort for engagement, right? I don't. It is what it is, and at some point, I think the certain punks expected that of them, and I never expected them to be there, right? Like it's like it was cool when they showed up in Discord every now and then, but generally it was because there was other bugs found, or there was front running or whatever would pop up. They would kind of make an appearance, but it's that development cycle, right? That they just kind of came in, and I think community management's a whole nother ballgame.
Yeah, I mean, I could sort of see that as well. I mean, the way that you were describing the Punk's Discord early on in the piece felt very pure, right? No strings attached, come and go as you please. You're there because you wanted to be. And I think, peak euphoria of the NFT sort of buzz, you're looking over the other side of the fence and thinking apes are getting this, they're getting all these drops and they're making a lot of money. And what are we punks getting? We've been here for a while, Matt John, do something. When you
Yeah.
when utility and in some ways that probably isn't what they sort of signed up for. And in some ways you could probably argue that the Discord got a little bit less impure after that. In some ways, people were there to make flips and making money, and but hopefully, the core essence of punks at its core, and this is why I love having these conversations with people like you, is hopefully we can tell these stories just to remind everybody, like, what punks are really fundamentally built on and what we're all about, right? And I think it's just a beautiful story, and no other collection absolutely has this, right? So, yeah, man. So this has been a super fun conversation. So thanks so much for jumping on the call. Maybe just, one last question before we close off. If you could pass a message on to the next owner of your Punk 2289, what would you like to say to them?
Yeah, so I think I already mentioned that would probably be my son, right? Like, so he would get that one. I've already started setting up wallets for them. So one of the things that, key management, all right? Like, I've been through this. I've lost my punks, like there's a responsibility that comes with this. So, you are upholding, as the new owner of this punk, you're upholding kind of some of this, technological advancement that, I was able to participate in. And this is, something for you to hold on to. So who knows where punks are going to be in 20 years. It's pretty crazy to think about.
How old's your son?
He's 12. Yeah, so he's young. He hears it too. When I'm talking to my wife, I did buy them. Gosh, I bought them their first NFT. It was like this cute little thing, and it was never meant to be any type of investment. It was just a cool little thing that I allowed them to pick. Right? It was cheap. I'm like, come in here. I want you to pick your own. Pick one. And so they kind of went through, looked at the trades, so they kind of get that. So I would be interested to see, I'm in that phase where when do they get a wallet, right? When do they start being able to explore this on their own? So it'll be a while before I give them this punk.
He's going to be in for a wonderful surprise.
That's right.
TJ, thank you so much again. This has been super fun. Any closing comments on your side, and how can people find you, I guess?
Obviously I lay low pretty regularly, but I'm on Twitter. I'm still following just some of the gen art, the QQL. I'm still, like, even Last Supper on Async. I'm looking for those new tech, just new novel ways, like looking at, cyber brokers and the mech building, and, the Last Supper where you can pull in different art, or even, Queens and Kings, and being able to hack those and pick and choose your traits. That stuff is fresh to me, right? It's like new, and we're trying to push those boundaries of tech. So
awesome. TJ, thanks again, mate. And hopefully we can catch you at one of the punk events in real life at some stage soon.
that'd be fun.
Yeah, man, what a story. So so thanks again, and guys, thank you so much for listening to another episode of PunkCast, and we'll be back next week with another punk. Bye for now.